We have developed a little mini tradition here where we kind of want to wrap up what we saw in 2024 and kind of discuss the trends that kept coming up in all these discussions that Lucas mostly hosted and I filled in here and there to host. And of course, I edit every single episode. So I am really in tune with what kind of topics kept coming up in 2025 and or what topics kept coming up in 2024 and what impact that'll have on 2025. So before I dive into my thoughts, Lucas, want to welcome you to the show, and I want to know what your initial takeaways were from what we heard most about in 2024.
Yeah. Well, Casey, don't sell yourself short. I think you did twice as many hosting jobs this year in 24 than you did in the past. That's partly because I think we ramped up the episodes, right? We did a lot of episodes in 2024. We were targeting one a week, and I think we hit the mark. But this is one of my favorite episodes because just like strategic planning, right? It's a time to kind of pick our heads up and kind of zoom out for a little bit, talk about what was being talked about. And then maybe if we have time at the end, we can look ahead a little bit and wave our magic wand and kind of throw out our guesses for next year. But man, there was a ton of conversation around leadership, mission. A lot of technology. AI is hot right now. So we talked a lot about that. We had a ton of folks on talking about diversity and equity and inclusion. AI kind of coupled coming back to the technology, lots of AI in the sense of, hey, how do you use this? What's good? What's not good? Finding one's voice, authenticity, culture, trust. I mean, there were just a really great mix of high-level leadership topics that were covered by both sides of the aisle, I say, tongue-in-cheek there. I mean, we have a lot of association executives on. We have a lot of vendors and suppliers, but all, 99% of the time we're within the association industry. So all relevant to our listeners who are right there with us in this market.
Yeah. And I want to, talk about the authenticity in media. It feels like AI and that authenticity piece goes hand in hand. I feel like people are not ready, at least in our association industry, to just let AI take the ball and run with it. If you're going to do a new initiative, be it revamping a newsletter or putting out a podcast, are associations ready to just put that in the hands of AI and then walk away and trust the algorithm to do its thing? Or as we were talking before we hit record here, if you're just going to let AI do something and then put it out as, say, a monthly email or something, I honestly not sure what the point of that would be, right? Don't our members crave the human touch? I mean, that's what we kept hearing in 2024.
Yeah, absolutely. That authenticity, human touch, authentic voice. I've seen some really cool AI where it can plug in if you have a history of authorship, right? So you could have particular programs, and let's just stay specifically for writing right now, right? Not the automation. I think the volume of automation is endless. And but if we're talking specifically voice, right? We're talking about content writing. There are AI programs, for example, you could say, hey, write me a pod in the form of Hemingway, right? And most of it can go out and capture enough Hemingway to kind of get a sense of the voice, but there's not necessarily enough voice of the association for it to learn from, like quote unquote, learn from, to be able to put out something that's going to be a true reflection of, right, in most cases, the small staff that is essentially the voice of an industry. I think you have to be really careful about what you put out. That's what association members are craving, right? They want to hear from you, Casey, like, for example, and is this really Casey's voice, or is this something that's just mimicked after a bunch of, scraped info they found somewhere on the web?
Exactly. What generative AI does, and that's probably like 90% of what associations, when it comes to content, would use, is your chat GPTs and all that type of thing. All it does is kind of take existing information that's already out there on Google and kind of synthesizes all that back together, right? So it's just regurgitating what you can already find via Google. So, that's not to me, the value proposition of content from an association. It's those exclusive, brand new interviews with your members. It's stuff you just can't get anywhere. It's behind the paywall, so to speak. It's not just something you can Google. That's the actual value of being a member, and beyond just going to the meeting or whatever credentialing that you rely on your association for. But we all, I mean, I love my content from my association, but I don't want just something regurgitated off Google. We all deserve better than that.
Yeah. Well, two schools of thought, Casey. One is this helps you put some thoughts, right? If you can feed it some really good prompts, it can feed you the words, and it can take you 90% of the way there. You still need to massage it, give it your own tone, and that's a positive. What about the idea that it makes you dumber? I'll say it challenges you less to be a good writer of content, a better journalist, a better communicator. I mean, where do you land on that? And it may be different, right? You and I both have young kids. Like it might feel differently on how it impacts kids versus adults. But in the association world, what is it? Is it more positive than negative? Because I believe it's both.
Again, I'm just going to come back to the authenticity piece, right? I mean, if I'm a member, I want an honest conversation. I want, something that, again, like is what we used to read in our monthly publications, like a great feature article that you just couldn't get anywhere else, going in depth in the industry that I'm passionate about. That's what I relied on when it came to content in my association. And, associations they're still doing great content. And that kind of leads me to another piece of this puzzle that we were seeing a lot unfold in 2024. And that was, I think people are going to kind of return to some of because there's going to be such an influx of technology and so much change that people are going to retreat to the old creature comforts of yesteryear. And I think, you've seen a lot of people betting big on actual print publications. And I know we haven't really talked about it too much on the pod, but I think direct mail might make a comeback because, people, what was once hot will come back again. It'll just be in a reduced role. So what are your thoughts about, in particular, the print publication and where that's headed in 2025?
Yeah, so aside from the trendiness of it, right? Because that is true, right? Everything that was once comes back. Look at fashion and everything else. Look at songs, right? Songwriters are taking old songs now and rewriting them with the same tune because it's like a sense of nostalgia. It may also be easier. But I think print comes back for a couple of reasons. So one is, it used to be when you go out to the mailbox, it's just kind of flooded with junk mail, right? And you could add yourself to a list and you could get some of that removed over time. But it was too much. There was too much in the box. And then we went all digital. We've kind of overcorrected in the sense, well, now my inbox is like completely flooded with junk. Spam filters are my favorite friend. Get this stuff out of here. Unsubscribe has now become an AI tool. Like AI is reading my email and telling me how much junk there is and that I should unsubscribe from things almost daily. Like, good for it. And so there's less noise in the mailbox and things that I can actually put my hands on. I think there's also an opportunity to step away from the digital in general. And, when you sit back with, you and I are both readers, like you sit back with a book, it's a very focused time. And so the attention is high quality, like with a written print publication. And there is something to just sitting there, feeling the book, like you feel a little bit disconnected. I don't have, my phone's not, try to read a book in one hand with your phone in the other. Like you just can't do it. Like detach from the digital for a second. It's also more real. Everything you see, REAL, not REEL. The fact that I even have to make the reference there is an indication of what I'm going to say next, which is there's a fantasy world that has developed online in social media that people can create using AI or just even without AI. You could create this glamorous life cycle, and I see it in people that can't pull themselves away because the real world isn't as exciting. And so you see it in our kids, right? Kids detach from the device. It's not too long before they go, I'm bored. Well, you're not really bored. You're just not living in the fantasy world that is instant reels and instant scrolling and all that. So there's an emotion and a feeling of connectedness with the publication. I think it will resurge again for multiple reasons.
Yeah, I would say that the delayed gratification piece is tough in our society. And, speaking of all those books that, I try to read and stay on top of, whether it be building a business or self-help, etc. And one of the constant themes that always comes up in those books is when they do a bunch of research and studies on kind of what are the common character traits of those that are, we consider the most successful, at least from an external looking perspective. Like, what are the commonalities among the most, quote, successful people on the planet? And one of the constant ones is something that runs counterintuitive with our society of always wanting that quick dopamine hit and that quick feeling of gratification. And it's delayed gratification. Like, that's one of the things, like, the most successful people are willing to, sit there, roll up their sleeves and make a long-term plan and stick to it. Yes, you have to adjust along the way, but it's like, there's nothing quick and easy that's worth doing. It's that, year after year of just, feet in the right direction. And it's hard, it runs counterintuitive to our daily lives of seeing, likes and validating ourselves through, how well our social posts do. So it's runs counterintuitive to society. But if you can focus and get a plan together, and, you're a strategic person, I know that from working with you over the years, if you can, stick to that plan and be a fan of delayed gratification, make that your thing. I think regardless of what, 2025 brings our way, that is the key. I think sticking to the plan and being okay with, gratification being delayed.
Yeah, well said. And I saw this, I'm sure you did too, in the episodes, a lot of association leaders, the emphasis on strategic planning has become more frequent, right? Where it used to be, let's do this every 5 years. I think that doesn't even pass the laugh test anymore. I'm a big advocate of doing annual strategic planning. And then even within that next period, doing check-ins pretty regularly. But the other piece, as you know, is you have to share the plan. You have to be transparent and honest about what you're trying to do. So if we write the plan as an organization or an individual and we don't share it with anybody, how is anybody going to know what it is that we're trying to do so that they might want to step in and help or support or advocate with you? There's just so much power in the communication, effective communication of the plan with your partner, your team, your community, your membership. Like, everybody needs to know where we're headed. And then if you really trace it back, why are you headed in that direction, right? Because if you get people behind the what and the why and where you're headed, it's super powerful. And we've heard a lot of that this year.
And accountability.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
mean, you make a plan. You should be sharing that with your membership base. This is where our association is headed. This is the 5-year plan. This is what we plan to do. This is why. And you got to communicate that. And look, people understand when plans need to be adjusted, but it just comes down to that all important part of, I hope, every association, and that's your communications team, and that they're communicating things carefully, and customer service is there when questions arise or when things don't go the right way. I know that the association that I was employed at for 8 years before I went off on my own to do some of this work as a consultant, one of the busiest offices, and we were so fortunate to have it, was an in-house call center customer service team. And you called our association, you called the American Urological Association, you were going to get someone on the phone who was a full-time employee that shared an office with us all, and that was really important to us. And again, that comes back to this piece of personalization and humanization, and something that we tend to be getting away from in a lot of ways with automation and AI, and trying to have people as cheaply as we can get, so to speak, on the payroll. But I know our association members appreciate that. When you called, we have an 800 number right there on the footer of our website. When you call that number, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, you're going to get someone on the line, and they're going to figure out your issue. And I think it's expensive to have a full-time employee, a team of full-time employees that can answer the phones, but your membership numbers will show over the long term that that's what people want.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you made me think of two things there. One, going back to just the sharing and transparency of your plan, your strategic plan, and your mission. That's what gets people fired up for volunteer opportunities, which again, we heard this past year is, again, just the lifeblood really of a lot of associations, especially smaller associations. The volunteer community and management of volunteers is such a key role for, again, small staff association executive directors to understand. But the way to get them engaged is share the mission, share what we're trying to accomplish. And if you share it effectively to a broad enough audience, people will ultimately find you, be attracted to that, and be willing to jump in and help in lots of different capacities. And whether that's a good vendor that finds you and said, hey, I have exactly the tool for you. I'm not trying to necessarily knock on your door and sell you something, but I think this can be a real solution. Let's have a conversation. Or volunteers who flock to you and say, how could I help? Or donators and say, hey, I really believe in this mission. Is there some place that you could take a grant or a donation and open an effective program with? I think that's huge. And the second piece that made me think of just the human touch is, the idea that there's a lot more emphasis on the experience and experiences. These, we're well back into live events, obviously, but there's a lot of thought that's going into those experiences and how they translate into more engagement, longer term, stickiness with the association. Just whether it's through technology or whether it's through creating personal touch live experiences, both have just been a very hot item. And we know it again because I think it also ties back into, let's get out of a little bit of the digital experience and into really making the live experience all that it should be.
Oh, the pendulum has swung. We've had so many guests on this show over the last year that were involved in annual meetings and events and member experiences. And it was just a given that people want in-person meetings, to the point where I would almost ask you, Lucas, are virtual meetings dead? Like, are people even wanting that as an option anymore?
Well, that's a great question. I think for the right audience, for the right opportunity, it still does, for a fairly light lift. You can create an opportunity for education, content consumption, some interaction, connection. I might meet somebody virtually through some type of forum or community, but ultimately, I want to get connected to that person at a deeper level. We need to go somewhere. We need to meet at a live event. We need to connect for a meal, break some bread, get to know each other if it's going to be a longer term partnership opportunity. I don't want to sustain that relationship in a digital sense. And we saw that even, we went to ASAE, we took the bus, going back, and I'd met some of those folks that were on the bus digitally or online, or we were LinkedIn connections or what have you. But, spending a few hours together on a bus, having a beverage, playing some games, like, I feel like that relationship has really taken itself to the next level. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, absolutely. And that is something I wanted to touch on, is the bus experience, because I don't think you can look back on 2024, in my opinion, when I look back on all the great things that I was a part of in the association space, and not think about the bus to ASAE 2024. I have a video that I will link to in the description of this podcast. So everyone who's not familiar with the bus, to ASAE can kind of catch up on in a little 2-minute clip. It's really a fun video. I produced it and shot it, so I'm a little biased, but I want you to check it out.
It is a great
But
video.
I think it's an example of the bus to ASAE, and I'm going to let you explain it briefly for us. That was just an out of the box idea that I think resonated so well. It was so successful because it was a member experience. It was an experience for constituents. It was an experience for people that are in our network in this association game, and it was efficiently done because, and again, I want Lucas to explain it, but it piggybacked on an existing event that we all knew people were going to. We all knew our community goes to ASAE every single year to catch up on their professional development and networking. And so we decided, we're not going to throw our own event, and we're not going to throw an event necessarily concurrent with the ASAE event because everyone has so many competing events to be at the event. So how do we create an event that takes people to an event that we all know people are going to? So therein lies the bus. Lucas, tell us about that.
Yeah, association chat, sort of fueled the whole thing and set everything up. I mean, it was just something Big Red M and a bunch of other sponsors jumped in on because, one, it was unique. It wasn't the same old thing, and there's a ton of energy, right? If you've been to ASA Annual, on the front end of that, the building of anticipation is big, and most of us, fly out to whatever destination, and most of the time, there's dozens of association executives on the plane with you, but they might be a couple seats over, or you might see them in line, and you get sort of, you get some conversations going, but it's not this dedicated time where you're ready to be there, and so I saw the uniqueness of this opportunity to be amongst a peer group that was all headed to the same event. Let's all feed on the energy, also network with a bunch of folks that we may not otherwise see there, may not have time, right? We've been there's a lot going on at ASAE Annual. And so what a fantastic way to do something different that was unique. I'd certainly never done anything like that. With that group or otherwise. And I watched people make connections with each other. I know that opportunities were had and partnerships were formed from that short trip that, may go on. We had some of those folks on the podcast, post event, and they're wonderful people to talk to, and just the insights and collaborations that came from both during and after the event were amazing.
Correct. Kiki L'Italian, who is the Association Chat founder and producer. You guys just you nailed it there. I mean, it's something that we're all trying to do. We're trying to capture people's attention. I think that was a big piece of another theme we heard in 2024. It's like attention is the new coin of the realm. It's the currency that we're all vying for. So how do we get attention without jumping into that red ocean of competition, right? Everyone's vying for attention. So there's got to be something you can do to get the people's attention you want to get, but do it in a way that no one else is doing. And that's what you did with the bus. Your team, the Association Chat team, and all the amazing resources that it provides for its constituents. You guys had the genius idea that I think it started as just almost a joke. It was like, hey, let's all take a bus to Cleveland because it's within range of where most of us all live in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. So it was like, let's just, it all started with a brainstorm and a kind of almost a joke that turned into actually people looking into and saying, no, actually this would be a great way to capture people's attention and do some honest networking. I mean, you're forced to talk to people when you're on a bus for 6 hours, yet it's something that we're all doing. We needed to get to Cleveland anyways, so it doesn't feel like a waste of time. It feels like there's no opportunity cost in your time. You would be doing this travel to Cleveland anyways. So now that we have everyone's attention, let's make it productive. Let's network. I met a ton of great people. We had Deidre Daniel, who has been on this podcast, and we'll link to her episode. Leading,
shout out to Deidre Daniel, because I mean, you say you have to talk to people on the bus. Like, this was so set up for introvert, extrovert, equality in the sense that there was a show that you were a part of. It was like an interactive show that was kind of so well planned out by the minute. And yeah, there was there were these breaks where like, okay, there's like a sip and chill 15, 20 minutes, or there's a break for lunch. And so there was it wasn't, you had to be on all the time, but the times when you were interacting with others, it was well planned out. Like there was enough instruction, and it was educational, it was comedic, it was fun, it was unique. I just keep coming back to that word because everything else becomes, like you said, just sort of noise, and you have to find ways to create unique experiences, and both, right? So that people remember what it was that they did at the time, who they met, while they were feeling all the things. And so I even we had guests talk about more intimate events that they were creating and sort of unique experiences at their association events. And it was right in the same vein of, publications are unique because there aren't as many of them. They now stand out. So it's about thinking about how can we stand out? How can we get that attention? Because the volume of everything else has just been amplified beyond belief with everything digital.
And it takes an experiment, right? It takes trying things. Trial and error is the name of the game in marketing, as far as I'm concerned. As far as my background in marketing has always been, it's you got to try things, and it's some people call it a minimally viable product. You try it with as little downside at risk as you can make, and then if it doesn't work, you move on to the next thing. And so the interesting part about taking a bus to Cleveland with all the people that we wanted to share an experience with, that's only kind of a one-off yearly thing, right? Cleveland, how many years is the ASAE meeting moves around, so you can't necessarily do it every year. It's a one-off event. Next year it's in Los Angeles. So that begs the question, was 2024, the bus to Cleveland, so successful that we have to figure out a way to do it again, even though it's obviously an air travel situation? You can't bus it across country, and people would not enjoy that. So it begs the question, is it a one-off thing? Is this something you can annually try to do with air travel involved, Lucas? I know this is off on a little tangent here, but what do you think there?
If Association Chat can come up, and Kiki can come up with another interesting way to make that happen, again, I'd be such a supporter on so many levels. It's not even funny, and it's been exciting that I talked to Kiki. She said people have been reaching out to her, going, "Hey, if you all do anything again, I want to be there. Right? Let's do this. Tell us what it's about." I mean, it's a little bit FOMO, but not because just missing out. It's because it was so fun and exciting and different and that's a little bit what Kiki's known for, right? I mean, it's such an experience, and she's so about making unique experiences. And she would jokingly say she's a little bit weird, but in the best way possible. And I think she can do it again. And if people are interested in that, they should reach out to her and tell her. And if you're listening, reach out to her, tell her you'd support it in some fashion, or just tell her you're interested. I think all of that will get itself fulfilled, because it's not a matter of financially, right? You have to take risks. I mean, you go back to what you're just saying about taking risks, and you got to take financial risks. You have to make some investments, and some of the investments will work out. Some of them won't, and some will just be exponentially worthwhile in the long run. But it is also some of the investments you might not see an immediate return. It's about building a culture and building a brand, and those are longer term initiatives. Those aren't, you do one thing and you see a return immediately. It's you do something, and 10 years from now, you turn around and you go, yeah, those were the things that made this happen. I mean, it's a series. It's not all one thing, but you have to continuously make those deposits and investments.
Exactly. It's networking 101. It's what we were talking about earlier with delayed gratification. It's, planting a seed. It's being respectful. It's sticking to your values. It's doing all the right things over and over again and not expecting anything in return because, everyone who's successful, we're seeing that theme. It's people that are okay with delayed gratification and people that are okay, and associations that are okay with looking at a long-term plan and sticking to that and communicating that plan so people are on board.
Well, yeah, and a lot of folks in the association community, we heard from them. That's what drives them. That's what brought them to the community. Well, a lot of them actually say they just found associations by accident, if we're being honest. And then they stayed, though, for the mission, because the passion behind the belief of the mission of these organizations are what keeps people around. So there, another chalk on the whiteboard, if you will, for why you should communicate your strategic plan and your mission, because people want to be around that. And there's no better retention tool than being passionate about a plan, sharing the details, and asking people to participate. It really isn't.
All right. So as we work towards wrapping up here, I want to get into final thoughts and predictions for 2025. I know the big theme coming out of COVID, it seemed to be kind of the AI thing and COVID, kind of the end of COVID kind of coincided with the explosion of AI and ChatGPT. And it's a big deal. If you talk to the biggest experts in this field, it's called the Turing test, I believe. It was the first time that a chat bot, so to speak, could pass as a human. It was a big moment. And that happened 3 years ago, 4 years ago. So it's a big deal and it's not going anywhere. And it just seems like it's not as big a buzzword. Like it's not like paralysis if you're not doing it. It felt like it was so overwhelming at a time with all the explosion of tools which continue to come out. But I know that was a big buzzword heading into 2024 is, how we're going to capitalize on AI, and it's certainly not going anywhere for 2025. But I wanted to get, your thoughts, Lucas, on any predictions or any themes or anything we didn't touch on that you want to hit on before we kind of work towards wrapping up.
Yeah. One of the things that from the episode with Joanna Pineda, who was also on the bus, right? I mean, another person, like just a connection. She made it onto the show, and she has her take on the membership cliff, I believe she called it, and we can look it up and correct me if that's not it. But the idea was it's a couple of different things coming together, and we've seen some of these already start to take shape. And one is, boomers leaving the market, right? Everybody's heard like, okay, boomers, yes, they're going to retire. There's going to be the greatest transfer of wealth. There's going to be all these businesses. They're going to be leaving the market. They're strong historical believers in associations and both their lobbying for their networking, for all the things like that leaves a little bit of a question mark of, will there be the same affinity and attraction to association missions by the younger generations? Will they stumble into it as all the executive have in the past? Or will it take a more concerted effort of recruiting, continuing to recruit younger members? And she sees an opportunity there. And the other piece coupled with that potential cliff is mergers and acquisitions. Also not a new thing, but these things are starting to accelerate in a way that, and we've had Big Red M has done a lot of work this year specifically in redoing membership models, because as this becomes more prevalent, right, you think two large members with our organization, one acquires the other, right? It's not partnership. There's always one acquiring the other. One member acquires the other, and the membership dues structure is not modeled such 1 + 1 = 2, right? Often 1 + 1 = 1 because they've reached a membership level where they're capped. And so what that means for the association is a member that was potentially paying 6 figures or more in dues is just simply gone. Overnight, the acquisition happens, and now that organization of one is only paying, 1 annual dues. So you have to really think through what that means for your associations. How can you even capture 1 + 1 = maybe 1.5 as a stepping stone? It's a difficult pill to swallow. And then Joanna even suggested further that, if there's VC or PE money that's coming in to make some of this happen, and then the sort of the control of the organization, some of that control is lost when you accept that type of capital. They may come in there and say, look, I'm in here to make money. I don't see the value of the association. I haven't been here as long. I just look at the balance sheet, and that's gone, right? 1 + 1 = 0 all of a sudden overnight in terms of a membership model. So there's a couple of things there. One is, is your association sort of M&A proof to a degree, to the greatest extent that it could be possible? Are you attracting enough members? Are you continuing to lean into value prop that is just beyond? I mean, again, value prop and diversification of revenues. Gosh, that train's been moving for 20 years, and I hope everybody's been on it the whole time. I know they haven't, but those are real things, to look out for in the next 5 years. It's already started. It's not a new trend, but let's just not dig our head in the sand. This is not going to go away like other trends. This is an economic happening. This is not a cultural trend or something that's influenced on social media, let's say. In fact, if it is influenced on social media and you're on there, it's accelerated more by social media, because the sense that these mergers and acquisitions, and access to all of this money, if you're on there, people show you how easy it is to do these and how it's a no-brainer. And all of this transfer of wealth only wants to see more return on their dollars, will be there in there making more of the decisions. And then, you want to put in a plug for strategic planning in another sense. It's a pretty big election changeover here going into 2025. And some associations will find it a struggle, and others will find it to be a tremendous windfall. But, associations have to understand strategically how this can benefit them in some way, and be prepared to act and pivot and do all the things that they need to do to make sure that both the interests of their members are well represented and that they're financially viable, moving forward.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said it better myself. I don't think when we talked about what we wanted to hit on today that we've really missed anything. Again, the trends of 2023 headed into 2024 feel a lot the same. Heading into 2025, I think you're going to continue to see the mergers and acquisitions that you talked about, and that has a ripple effect on, of course, membership and in the new presidential administration coming into 2025. That is, of course, something that no one has a crystal ball on, but the associations, we've talked about it off this podcast, hasn't come up too much during this podcast, but the association world is facing some serious tax reform legislation that could really impact what they do and what they're able to do. So
yeah, if you're listening and haven't heard about that somehow, go look it up. It can be very significant. And then the other piece I'd throw in, Casey, is we had a couple of guests that were in the association market representing an international audience, and their emphasis on sustainability was unique, compared to what we see here in the U.S. And so, what can we learn from that and how to implement that? It's not as much of an emphasis for us right now, but maybe that's something that's coming with, longevity and maturity and so forth.
Yeah. Shout out to Ioannis Pallas, who is the leader of the executive director of the European Association
100%.
of Society Executives. He came to Cleveland to reflect, and we had him on the show to reflect on what was different about association, and that was one of my favorite episodes of all of 2020.
It was fascinating.
Yeah, he basically reflected on the differences between the association communities in the United States and / North America versus that of Europe. And one of his biggest takeaways was the sustainability piece. He said that's just every association in Europe is so focused on what they can do to reduce that carbon footprint and how much it impacts meetings. And I know there are meetings and associations throughout North America that are on that train, so to speak, but I just think there's going to be way more of that coming. And Europe is kind of taking the lead on that, and we're going to see that's not going anywhere. People want more sustainable meetings, and so stay tuned on that.
It was a great episode, also because there were things that the U.S. was doing well that the European societies were also trying to learn from too. So it was just the understanding that there's mutual respect opportunities in education was just a great conversation.
Definitely check the link to definitely check the description of today's podcast for a link to that full episode and more. Lucas, this will be the final word for 2024. I appreciate what we're doing as a team here on the 6 Degrees of Associations podcast, and here's to another great year in 2025. And stay tuned. coreadventures.com/podcast every single Wednesday.
Yeah. Cheers. And I appreciate you, Casey. Couldn't do this without you. You're a rock star when it comes to this production and all things podcast. So I really do appreciate the partnership. You're doing a great job, and I can't wait for next year.
All right. Cheers, everyone. We'll see you in 2025.